Y'all, we live in difficult times. There's war, political unrest, the pandemic, poverty, families being torn, communities ripped by gun violence and people dying every day, police, injustice. It's all bringing so much pain. But y'all, we can look inside our minds and we can understand who we are, become better, and do this thing like we've never done it before. But it all starts with our mental health, and I know we can do it. I believe in you because I believe in me, and I believe in us. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Therapy is Life, where thinking, feeling, and experiencing well-being is what we do. Today, we're going to be talking about some African-American history. That's right. We need this ancestral knowledge so we can be our best selves, because how can we think straight if we don't know where we've been and what we've been through, right? So today I have with me Randle Trava. That's what I was. What's going on, man? Today we're going to talk about some small towns in America that have historically been known as, that's right, African American communities. I have my guy here, Randle Trava. He's going to tell us a little bit about himself, but then we're going to be able to explore some of these small towns that are at the fabric of what makes the African American community what it is today in America. I'm so proud to be a part of this history. But I gotta say, Randle, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Okay, good pleasure to be here.
Yeah, that's what's up, man. We go way back.
Yeah,
Look, I feel like I was a kid, but we probably knew each other long before we knew each other.
Exactly. Because our families, of course. Yeah.
Families. Yeah. Your daddy knew my. Your daddy knew my. My daddy knew your family. Your family knew my family. We go way back, man.
Yeah.
It's
and actually,
truly
my uncle and your dad used to travel with our church council. So yeah.
Exactly. So that's how far we go back. Yeah. See, it's so crazy. So, man, before we get all off into the dialogue around these small communities, man, tell us a little bit about you, man, and what you do.
Well, again, Randle Trava. I'm a vocalist, performer. Actually been singing all my life, of course. Come from a very musical family. My mom, on my mom's side, it was 14 of them, and all 14 could either sing, play instruments, and it kind of trickled down. I've had the pleasure of doing background vocals, touring the world with some various recording artists. Been a part of the Harlem Gospel Singers, which is Queen Esther Merrill's Harlem Gospel Singers, which that's another Black history moment with Queen Esther Merrill. She was the original, and you could Google her. She was the original Auntie M, the original production of The Wiz with Stephanie Mills. She was actually, again, another Black history moment. She was actually discovered at the age of 20 by Duke Ellington.
What?
What you say? So she's originally from Newport News. So I've been around, as I said, I've done some traveling, been blessed to do some background vocals for some various artists. So yeah.
Gotcha, man. So you found your passion early, huh?
Very much, yeah. I knew at a very young age. From the moment my mom and my uncle stuck me out in church to sing, I knew right then and there, yeah, that was my calling.
That was a calling. Yeah. You know, I think song and music is such an important piece of like our spiritual and our emotional and our intellectual makeup.
Yeah.
Music. And I always find that when I think about important things in my life, I kind of always equate it to something related to some music. When obviously the whole idea of lift every voice and sing, it's like such a powerful song for me, because I feel like it talks about liberation in such a joyful way, but yet at the same time it embraces the struggle.
Yeah.
You know, and then I could flip to like, you know, remember that old song we used to sing in church? I'm a soldier and I'm the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and those, believe it or not, those had some, and and which correlates right into our topic of Black history. A lot of those songs correlate to our history, as, and I mean, and even as going back as far as to the motherland.
Exactly.
It correlates to, well, and we're bringing it here, like This Little Light of Mine correlates to, that was their way on the plantations of actually communicating
Exactly.
with each
Exactly.
other. So yeah, so music has always been, as I said, from the motherland to here. You think about the various tribes that were captured and brought here. They brought the drum.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
there was actually, and a lot of people don't know that the violin and the banjo
Mm-hmm.
is an actual West African instrument. So it wasn't invented by Europeans. It was an instrument that was originated in West Africa that was brought to the Americas. So yeah, it's a rich
Mm.
history, rich history, rich.
So that brother that was in France, that they, I think, what they call him, the
Chevalier,
yeah, his brother.
Chevalier. I think I'm pronouncing it
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was
It was already
already
natural. Yeah, yeah.
it
It
was
was
already
natural.
there.
It was natural. It was
So
natural. It
he
was
was
natural.
so listen, like you had an opportunity to travel across the world talking about, we're gonna get into this, talking about African American in the gospel music and going to different parts of the world. I mean, what was some of the impression what some of the impressions you got of how they interpreted the music?
Well, I'll say this. When my very first experience in Europe, I found that it was the appreciation
Mm-hmm.
that the Europeans have for, I would say, anything black. Anything black.
Mm.
I mean, from hip hop, gospel, jazz, R&B, they eat it up. So it's a different kind of. I'll say this: I've done, which I've not done, the club scene in Cleveland for numerous years, but I still do, like, very, like, Nashville, Las Vegas, and
Mm-hmm.
places like that, Atlanta. But I noticed the crowds here is totally different from over there. As I said, I used to do the clubs here in Cleveland, and it was just different, Whereas you go to a club, a jazz club that has live entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, when it's all black, we tend to not. There's no real appreciation, and maybe that's just my experience, but also various other musicians and artists that I've the pleasure of knowing and working with pretty much say the same thing. And if you think, a lot of times we look at various artists from, like, the 80s and the 70s and the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
and we think, where are they? Well, they're not over here. They're overseas,
Mm.
still performing, but they're performing overseas because there's a greater appreciation for our music and our culture. So I'll say that far as Europe. Now I'll say my first time stepping my foot on the soil of Africa. Now that was a totally different
Man, I'm so
experience.
godly jealous of you. You been to the motherland?
Yeah, it was type actually a different type of experience. I'll say, and it actually, everybody, all of the black singers and musicians that were on that tour with us, all felt the same thing. It was just immediate. The moment we stepped off the plane, it was like, it's kind of hard to describe. It was almost, it was just a sensation that came over you, like, wow, okay. And it was
Jeez,
almost
man.
like the ancestors was embracing us, like welcoming us back home. So yeah,
Wow,
that
man.
was a different kind of experience
Wow,
there.
this Sankofa bird.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Bringing you back to the very
yeah, yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
So, with that being said, man, I want to say this. We want to get into discussion about these little known African American communities, and I just want to appeal to everyone around the importance of what we might consider to be ancestral knowledge. Sometimes I think there is a gap between where we are now because we live in this very present space, and we lose sight of our history and the things that where we've come from. And I think that's why it's important for us to understand history, not just particularly African or African American history, but all American history, all world history, so it can help us have a better understanding.
Because we played a big part in the world, in world history.
Exactly.
You know, we played a big part.
Exactly, a big part. So today, man, let's get into these small towns. I know we wanted to start with Brooklyn, Illinois, and so give us a little background on Brooklyn. And I got a few questions, but I'm gonna wait into. Because I'm curious. I'm excited about this because I've never heard of Brooklyn, Illinois. It's like, what?
A lot of people don't realize. I mean, the most we'll think about when we think about us establishing our own. The one that comes to mind because they made the movie Rosewood. You know, that becomes to mind. But there were others, so many outside of Rosewood.
Exactly.
And as you mentioned, Brooklyn, Illinois, actually was a town that it was established in 1829.
Exactly.
And they called her, she gathered the name, and I think that's something that's been passed down in our culture because, as you know, even with our church affiliation, we tend to call our pillars of our church mother.
Right, exactly.
We call her the mother. So she obtained the nickname of Mother Priscilla Baltimore, and she led 11 families comprised of freed as well as fugitive slaves. And she established Brooklyn, Illinois.
Gotcha.
And it was right on the banks of the Mississippi River.
Okay.
Which is, if for those that don't know where she was in Illinois, and you just cross the Mississippi of St. Louis, you're in Illinois.
Gotcha.
And so she established this little known town, Brooklyn, Illinois. And it started with just 11 families.
That's amazing because when they went, I understand it was a really secluded area, so it was kind of perfect for slaves and recently freed people to go there because they could kind of be hidden away from some of the tyrannies and the oppressive stuff that was going on with slavery. Because remember, this is in 1828, and you had to think they lived with a lot of hope, but also a lot of fear that at any point in time people could come through there and they could just take them back into slavery or make them a slave even if they was free. As we think about 12 years a slave and what happened there, he was a free man. But this was an opportunity for these individuals after being either just recently free from slavery, or they were Black people who were free, or Black people who were running away from slavery. They had a chance doing slavery to actually live free and then own their own homes.
Yeah, own their own homes, businesses like they started, like, of course back then they're shop owners, blacksmiths, carpenters. So they were established. And another thing about Mother Baltimore, she was one of the earliest known female preachers in the Methodist Episcopal Church. And she established the Brooklyn AME Church in Brooklyn, Illinois. So she not only did she help found a town, she helped found the AME Church there, and she was like one of the earliest known women, and not only just Black but women preachers in the AME. So
look at that. You know what? I think a lot of times when we talk about history, I appreciate you sharing that with me, because a lot of times when we talk about history, it feels like it's has such a patriarchal men center, but when you start to look through history, you realize that women have done so much in many ways in America. Black women stepped out and did things that no women were doing at the time. And you hear her, like what she did with 11 families and went and established this city. And some people said she was a missionary, right?
She was a missionary. Yeah.
So she was able to do this. She had to have a lot of faith
Tenacity. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah.
lot of faith and tenacity. And sometimes I think people don't realize the importance of faith and why it is such a critical piece to our overall well-being, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. We think about it in spiritual context, but faith is such an important space. Because I'll say this about her and all the places we're about to discuss is a lot of these people did what they did in a time when they didn't know that things were going to be different. They didn't know
Right.
that things were going to change. In 1828, they didn't know in 1863 or 1864 that slaves were going to be free.
Yeah.
They was just trying to make the best out of a situation.
Yeah.
So many of us act like we only focus on what we know to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we call it facts. Like this, there's a floor here. That's a fact. But
Yeah.
but a lot of things in life we hope for and we strive towards, even though the facts would tell us that it's not possible.
Oh yeah, and that's I'm glad you because there was not only that of what the old people, she had gumption.
Yeah.
Because she even had gumption not to just even go and establish this town. She even established where the Underground Railroad came through there. So she wasn't just thinking of the 11 families that came with her. She was also one that provided, because the AME church that they established was a stop on the Underground Railroad. So, and you got to remember, by them being right there on the Mississippi River, so they were getting all of those coming up from like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, all of those, Nashville, Tennessee. So all of those towns that are along the Mississippi River. So she was a pioneer in so many ways. And as I said, she had gumption.
She had gumption. And it'd be curious to know how many slaves she actually helped get free.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's not known, but yeah, I would love to know that too.
Yeah, how many slaves that she helped free? Another thing I'm curious about with that city, since it was built by African Americans, the architecture there. Because I think that's important, because a lot of times we think about architecture, we look at the architecture in Cleveland, we can say that this was, Polish people, or this was Slavic, or, the English, or different building styles. And when you look at what, Africans were doing in America, slaves were doing when they were building things, obviously they had their own styles, and a lot of that maybe got, forgotten, because so much of our history has been, set aside.
Yeah, yeah.
And even there might be some things that we built and created that had European names on it, but yet it was really designed and cultivated by Africans. And that's I think that's one of the critical pieces of American history, is to truly understand the involvement of African slaves and African Americans. Because not to get off subject, but to kind of like to make the point, I visited Charleston, South Carolina, and one of the things I thought was very fascinating when they began to talk about the harbor there, how the houses were set up in line, that slaves organized that. So that when ships came into the harbor, they could know exactly how to come into the harbor because of the way that slaves designed the city. Yeah. You think about the idea of Benjamin Banneker. People might know him as a watchmaker, but he designed the Capitol. Wow! Not only was the Capitol built by slaves, but it was designed by a black man.
But that even goes back to Africa, because we a lot of our knowledge we brought with us, and we couldn't display. And I'll just fast forward to a lot of what the cities and all of that were passed down, but at some point we allowed others to. Now I would say, I think I'm, out of all of us, I'm about the oldest one sitting here, about ancient, but I'm a 60s child.
Right. Okay.
So I grew up in the era where my neighborhood, I grew up right here on 30, not too far from here, on 38th. And back then it was called, I believe now it's called Community College, but back then, it's probably still Quincy. But where I grew up, that entire neighborhood, everything in that neighborhood was black owned.
Mm.
Black owned.
Say it
I
loud.
grew up on a street where across the street was a doctor.
Mm.
We had a lawyer, Lonnie Burton, which went on to be a part of the city, run for city council and won, right down the street. We had a dentist that was down the street. The corner store, Mr. Reynolds, black owned. The gas station at the corner, black owned. The meat store, and what we call it's Longwood Plaza. It was Longwood Plaza, but all of the businesses at that time were black owned. I may get it a little. I hope we don't get canceled, but I really believe that desegregation was the downfall of the black community.
Okay.
Because of my experience.
Gotcha.
I really believe that desegregation was the downfall because a lot of our young people today are not growing up. I'm talking about those that's in the hood, are not growing up with a doctor, a lawyer, dentists, entrepreneurs, right there in the hood.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
right there in the hood. So I grew up where I could see
that.
You know,
yeah.
So although there was the drug dealer, there was the pimp, but that doctor and having that doctor, that lawyer, that entrepreneur there overshadowed
Gotcha.
the negative.
So there was more positive influences within the community. And so what's happened is many of our African American children grow up in these communities that avoid of these type of role models.
Because we moved out.
Yeah.
Once desegregation set in, okay, I could move up in Shaker.
All right.
And then we start selling our businesses.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I'm thinking, and it makes me think about Mother Baltimore, and I often think, how would these people, these pioneers, how would they view where we are today, knowing that, dude, I suffered, and so and established all blackness, and we were allowed to think that the other is better.
Right. The other is better. You know, that old saying, the grass looks green on the other side. Yeah. You know, I appreciate Mother Priscilla Baltimore. That's amazing what she did at Brooklyn, Illinois. What's another one we got there? I know we had like 4 of them, y'all. We're going to save the beach to the last, though.
Okay, well, we could go to Mounds Bayou.
Mounds Bayou. Oh, my God. Love it. Mounds Bayou. You know, Mounds Bayou, just the name of it in itself, you know, I'm curious because mound it infers something to me almost like something very native, because mounds are oftentimes places where they would like have ceremonies or bury their dead. Now, I don't know, but when you know, they even got mounds here in the state of in Ohio.
Right over where I live at there's a Mounds Elementary School. Yeah. So yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Mounds.
Okay, well, Mounds Bayou, it actually traces its origins to freed African Americans from the community of Davis Bend, Mississippi. And Davis Bend was started in 1820s.
Okay.
So just think about that. The pioneer was Joseph E. Davis. And he was the elder brother of the Confederate president. And so Davis, he was also influenced by the ideas of Robert Owen.
Okay.
So they were pretty much, how can we say, I don't want to say, I don't want to paint them as just these loyalists to black culture, but I think they were more or less what they would call back then separatists.
Okay.
You know, to where they were kind of, sort of, slightly abolitionists, you know, in a sense, but more so it was just, I don't want no slaves, but I want them over there.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So, but Mounds Bayou, Isaiah T. Montgomery, he led the founding of Mounds Bayou in 1887.
Gotcha.
And it's in the northwest portion of Mississippi, which is still right there on the Mississippi Delta,
Mississippi
right
Delta.
there on the Mississippi River.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's right there. It's right there on what they would call the bottomlands,
The bottomlands.
which was not so considered not so fertile land. You know what I mean? But that even is a testament to what we could take take nothing and make something out of nothing.
I'm curious. When you were talking about the being separatists and the abolitionists, you were saying at this point in time, this was during Reconstruction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So during that time, blacks were making moves, trying to get involved in politics and voting, and these abolitionists, these people, they really wasn't concerned about having integrated relationships with black people on some level, but they just wanted to be separate.
Yeah.
And so this city was a manifestation of that idea.
Yeah.
And then to your next point, you were talking about the idea of the land being fertile, but not being that fertile. So this land was given to this group of black people. It wasn't that fertile, but then black people took it and they began to create things. Now, and looking at some of the information you gave me, I saw that they developed a sawmill there. They developed a cotton mill, a cotton oil, or cotton oil or oil mill there, and one of the things I thought I read about Booker T. Washington and trying to motivate the people there was, look, you've been getting land together, you've been cultivating cities and towns and farms for the slave masters, for the oppressors. Now, why can't you, the colonizers, why can't why can't you do it for yourself? And that was part of the motivation for them to really put this town together. And this town, they would have banks. To your point earlier, they would have banks there, hospitals.
They had 5 newspapers.
5 newspapers.
Five newspapers. You know, in that area that catered to what was going on, not only just in that community, but black communities around the country.
And hold on. Speaking of hospitals, they had the Tuberon Hospital, and that was one of the first black hospitals in the country. Am I correct?
Yes.
And I thought I read somewhere Medgar Evers went to the hospital before. Was in that city, and he went to the hospital, and he received treatment. I was like, look at this, and that's and that was also the place where he started to become more politically aware, politically conscious. And
they had, and they as time went on, they developed their own credit unions. You know, they also developed their own, as we mentioned, hospitals, the 5 newspapers, insurance companies. You know, so they were. You know, the vision of it all was more so was basically looking at, okay, like you said, this is what they have. Why can't Frederick Douglass tell them, why can't we establish these things for ourselves? So yeah, Mounds Bayou, yeah. And actually, I was in Mississippi some time ago. Well, I've been quite a place, but when I read up on Mounds Bayou, that's one place I actually do want to go visit.
Yeah, I definitely want to go to Mounds Bayou. I definitely have to go there. I want to go there and visit it. I mean, it seems like it would be a great place to go. I don't know, when I was looking at it, it seems like they have a celebration around Christmas time. Well, the churches and stuff come together.
Yes, they come together. And that was actually, if I'm not mistaken, that was established around 1901, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow. So that would be, I got to go. I'm like, man, so.
But yeah, they actually, Teberon Hospital. That was that Teberon Hospital. And actually, but that was actually opened in 1942.
It was open in 1942?
1940. Well, it was the building itself, the actual building of Teburon
Was open
was open.
in
But
19.
of course, the Teburon Hospital was established much earlier. But
Understand.
of
The
course,
building.
they didn't have a building, so the doctor pretty much during that time they did stuff out of their homes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know what? I want to make sure we make a really clear point here. Why? Because we might make assumptions, and I think this ancestral wisdom comes in place here. Because in this scenario, we talk about a Black hospital. When my understanding is when Black people went to your regular hospitals, many times they had to go through the back door, and they would have to wait for white people to be taken care of. So if you went in there and you was really sick and you were close to death, that it's very possible that a white person could have came in and they would have got treated before you did. So that whole idea of care and thinking about how you had to be subjugated like that had to be crazy, and to live with that reality that every day when you went to see a doctor, that that was a possibility. And I think sometimes we don't talk about that. We'll talk about the Tuskegee experiment, but probably what was even more devastating was experiences like that, going into hospitals or going to doctors and being, having to wait.
And then you think about even today, there's this assumption that you heard the fact that Black people can withstand more pain than others. So so all of that played a part. Now, when you mentioned Medgar Evers actually moved. He actually lived in Mounds Bayou.
Oh,
He actually moved there in 1952 as an insurance salesman.
Dude, there it is.
Yeah. So him and his family actually lived in Mounds Bayou for some time before they moved to Jackson.
Gotcha. And I was listening to this lady who lived in Miles Bayou talk about what was going on now, and she was saying that most of the people, they grow up, they got educated,
Move away.
They move away, and so the town has, the population has, been reduced and stuff because people move away. They've gone to other places, and largely due to opportunities elsewhere. We could say segregation. So, desegregation has led to people going to other places and living their lives, which have hurt these
various communities.
Communities. I got you.
Yeah. But and actually during that time, that's where the Emmett Till trial was held. The Emmett Till, yes, in 19 Mounds Bayou. Within that vicinity, it's right. Yeah,
the same county.
The actual rallies that were held during that time in Mounds, which was in Mounds Bayou between 1952 and 1955, and it actually drew huge crowds. And this was, like I said, during the Emmett Till trial.
Gotcha. See, it's some good stuff. Good stuff here, man. Good stuff, man. Powerful, right? And one of the things about Mounds Bayou, I think that's really critical to understand, because it was like this all-encompassing community that had everything that you needed. It was in Mississippi of all places, this haven for Black people to live without having to deal with all the day-to-day issues related to racism and prejudice and discrimination. You just go to this in Mississippi of all places.
Right.
It kind of feels like a Wakanda.
Yeah. Now, going back to when we were talking about, which is in 1892, the Mounds Bayou Normal Institute, which was a Black school for the Blacks in that area. But again, it was It's founded by the American Missionaries Association, which we know
Mm,
were white people.
gotcha.
So I don't want to get edited for even saying that, but yeah, I mean
That's
canceled.
okay.
But
It's okay.
yes, but that was still goes back to the notion of, okay, we'll educate you and help you. We'll help you do this. We'll help you do that. But we still want you over there. You
Right.
know,
You
yeah.
still want you over there. Yeah. And it's yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah, we still want you over there. It's just it's because you know you're secondary.
Hmm.
You know, I'm gonna say that point to after you know, we get finished because that is such a critical space.
And but you think about the name though, the Mound Bayou
Normal.
Normal Institute. Just think about that for a minute. The Mound Normal.
Normal. Oh my gosh. Man, Jabril, are you listening to this? Like normal.
The Normal Institute.
Normal.
So basically, the undertone of it all, you know what I mean? You know, the Normal Institute.
Man, it just feels like there's always these psychological undertones that always saying that you're not as good, you're
Yeah.
not as capable, you're not as able, you don't have the capacity to do all that that we can do,
Mhm.
and was always like there was this push on that,
Mhm.
and you have to wonder when we look at people sometimes people talk about they'll point out when slavery was ended and they'll say like 200 years ago, but it
Mhm.
wasn't 2 years ago. But they act like when slavery ended, that was the last thing that happened.
Right.
But there
Right.
was so much stuff that happened.
Right.
And so even when they did good, or there was attempts to do good, there was always this oppressive attitude and spirit that was still psychologically keeping us in bondage. Hello, my people, and this is Gerald McGee with the Revolt Network, and we will continue this discussion in the next episode. Me and Randle Trava, we going to hit it up a little bit more. Talk to you soon.